The Nigerian government has disputed the latest economic report by the country's biggest multilateral lender, the World Bank, which estimated that 139 million citizens are living in poverty, describing the figure as unrealistic and detached from the country's economic realities. President Bola Tinubu's special advisor on media and public communications, Sunday Dari, stated in a post on his official X handle on Wednesday that the poverty figures must be properly contextualized within the limits of global poverty measurement models. According to Mr. Dari, the 139 million figure was derived from the global poverty line of $2.15 per person per day, which was set in 2017 using purchasing power parity and should not be mistaken for an actual headcount of poor Nigerians. World development expert Gbolahan Olojede joins us now to have a quick look at this World Bank report on Nigeria, the federal government's reaction, and how the Tinubu government can deepen economic reforms to pull more people out of poverty. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Yeah, good afternoon. Nice to be here.
So do you agree with this estimate from the World Bank, that 139 million Nigerians now live in poverty despite the federal government's economic reforms?
I've never agreed with World Bank numbers about Nigeria. We live in a country where we don't even know how many people live in Nigeria. So my question is, if you don't know how many people live in a place, how do you know how many people are poor? So there are numbers that are, rates and percentages that are ascribed to certain population census that have been taken several years ago. And you begin to ask yourself, how reliable are these numbers? But the fact that I don't agree with the numbers, or I don't even understand those numbers, does not take away some of the core messages of what the World Bank is saying. And the undertone for me is to say, look, there is still an uninclusive growth. We are growing. Numbers are up there. It is not percolating down to the bottom rung of the ladder. So the ordinary man on the street is still not feeling those numbers. That is how I interpret what World Bank is saying, not in terms of specific number of 139 or 140 million.
And, there's been a lot of discussion about this, and it will continue to go on. But this World Bank's findings of increased poverty, how does it reconcile with this current administration's claims of the reforms making things better, about recovery and inclusivity with the reforms?
The truth is there is indeed recovery, and the numbers are everywhere to show that. Is it true that the exchange rate has been stable for about 15 months? The answer is yes. Is it true that the stock exchange is doing well? The answer is yes. Is it true that the government revenue has increased? The answer is yes. Is it true that oil production has gone up? The answer is yes. So there are indications that the economy is recovering, or it has taken a turn. But that is not all there is to be. It's just a first step. We now need specific policies to ensure that those gains that we are seeing up there, those numbers that have turned positive, can also be made to count for everybody, especially the people down the rung of the ladder. That is where the problem is. That's where the disconnect is. Not that there has not been changes. There has been major recoveries in the economy.
So what about the federal government's rejection, of this report? According to Sunday Dari, the global poverty line, of $2.15 per person per day is not realistic to the Nigerian context. Do you agree with this?
I like I said before, I don't agree with the numbers. But I think what government needs to do is that it needs to step beyond just disputing the numbers, to look at the core message that those numbers were meant to be conveyed. I don't think that the numbers were meant to rubbish the gains that have been made, but rather to send a message to say, look, there is still a disconnect, and there's an opportunity for deliberate policies to connect that what is going on at the upper part to the lower part and let everybody feel the gains that we have right now.
But that, sorry, if I may just interrupt. I know
Yeah.
that several times the president himself has acknowledged, that a lot of pains have come with his reforms.
Correct.
And he has begged a lot of Nigerians to be patient, saying that the hardship is temporary. So isn't it a bit hypocritical to be denying, this report from the World Bank?
Well, it will appear so. That's what the minister has done. I think these are politicians. And while they are there you can't rubbish your government, so you still go out there and say things. But we can look at things the way they are and take steps. Even for Mr. Dari, after he has made his point, I'm sure, I want to believe that he will sit down with his principal and say, look, these are the realities. These are the areas where we still need to work. And then deliver policies that will break that disconnection that we currently have. Yeah,
we would certainly hope so. And speaking of those areas, what, in your opinion, are three of the complementary structural reforms that you feel Nigeria needs to prioritize now to ensure that growth is inclusive and pulls millions out of poverty?
Good. The tax reform is in due season, because taxation is one of the most popular instruments for redistributing income. So when it comes into force in 2026, we should not just allow it to run without measuring. As it is running, let's measure, let's see if it is delivering what you expect it to deliver. And if there are areas where we need to correct it, that we can move in and correct it to use it as a strong instrument for redistributing income. Then all the other interventions that are there, the NEL Fund, for example, is a fantastic intervention. I learned it as, disbursed about 100 billion to people. That's fantastic. The other cash transfer programs, we need to get bolder with transparency around those programs. You see, even in countries in the Western world where you might say, oh, they are more sophisticated, they have data. Up till today, there are still crimes around the COVID cash transfers in the US and across the entire Europe. Massive stealing. So you can imagine what is possible in our kind of environment when you do cash transfer programs. So the government needs to take bolder steps, look at that program, and just decide to make it more transparent and more effective. So it would do a bit.
So how can the government, ensure transparency and accountability in implementing these poverty reduction programs, like the social protection programs, and how can they track progress?
We need to be able to validate the database, and it's an independent validation. What we have so far doesn't come across to me as an independent validation. I remember one of the ministers, when she was just appointed, went to somewhere in Yaba and spoke with a few people, and I was asking myself, is this how to validate a database? You can make an independent validation of that database, and it will be a bold step to give transparency to what you're doing. So when you do that, you will curb the money that goes into the wrong hand, and you have a more effective program. That's the way to go. And
even speaking of the database, because that's part of the issue here, how did they count those the population and the households to determine the numbers? What's the most accurate measure of current household welfare in Nigeria? What indicators beyond head count? Could it be food inflation, real wages, access to basic services? Like, what metric can be used that could be more accurate so we can start from somewhere?
I think it's a mix of many things. For example, while I have said I don't agree with numbers from World Bank because I don't know where they're pulling it from, it now beholds on us to say, look, we are Nigeria, this is our country. What do we want to measure? We determine that and we create metrics, knowing exactly the peculiarities of our environment. Let me give you an example. There's something called transfer income. And when we are measuring poverty, how does transfer income factor into what? Transfer income is what makes a man who says he earns 70,000 per month to be able to pay his rent, to send his children to school, to buy food, to take transport to work inside that 70,000. You must ask yourself, how has he been doing it? It's because there are some incomes that are not earned that comes to him. And that is small, that is peculiar. How do we take account? How many people will dash you $20 in America or $10? It doesn't happen. You know, so all those peculiarities, we have to build it into what we seek to measure. Of course, food inflation is one of the things we need to measure, or how it affects households. And that is because food affects everybody. And if you solve food matter, that is typically my campaign. If you solve food, you will have solved 50% of the problem that we're talking about.
So what international best practices or lessons can Nigeria draw from in addressing poverty and, of course, promoting economic development?
Number one is that copy and paste doesn't really work. Cash transfer was not original to Nigeria. It's been done in some South America and some other parts of the world. What were the peculiarities of those societies? So rather than copy it and bring it down here, we must look at our own structure. Is government even in the best place to do cash transfer? Or are there existing societal structures that could do it more effectively? You know, structures that have been there, they've been even involved in this thing before. Should we leverage on them? You know, so we cannot do copy and paste. That is an example. We must look at our system and design something that will work for our environment. It's one of the major steps we need to take.
Yeah, with everything concerning the continent, it needs to be tailor-made. That is pretty much the bottom line of this. But concerning the trade barriers, do you think that the government should reconsider some of the trade barriers and import duties on essential food and intermediate goods in order to help to mitigate the cost of living currently?
It's part of what I believe the government is doing. I remember there was this, charge to people to be able to import food within a certain period of time, and for certain waivers here and there. So that is already part of what is going on. But I don't think it was meant to go forever. It was for a window of time. It is part of what I was referring to when I said when the new tax reform launches next year, as it starts to run, we must continue to measure to see if it is delivering on what we expect it to deliver. And based on that, we know what to proceed with, what to slow down, and what to stop, so that it can be made to work as it's supposed to work.
So how can civil society organizations, and other stakeholders,
Correct.
like our international partners, how can they be engaged, in the poverty reduction efforts and held accountable for their roles?
I think they are actually supposed to be involved in these intervention programs, because you see, a lot of these institutions are already involved on their own in certain private interventions. So you will see some NGOs will go to some poor neighborhood. So they have some database of sort, already in place. So government should be ready to work and leverage on these existing structures to make what they are doing more effective. That, in my opinion, is a very important part of how to make this thing work.
And there obviously need to be tailored regional development strategies to address some of the deep-rooted structural and social issues that are causing some of these imbalances. How can we address those?
It still goes down to, because you spoke about regional peculiarity, and that is because even within Nigeria, there are peculiarities from place to place. There are parts of Nigeria where you cannot see the women. They are inside, always inside the house, and you have to, so those things are there. So programs have to be designed with all those things in mind. Across where the local country, which is why some of the important structures for getting across to the poor is actually the traditional institution, the structures. The church, the religious body structures. In my church, for example, we already do a lot of intervention. So if you ask us to tell you where the poor are in certain areas, we will tell you exactly where they are, because we are there every Sunday dealing with them.
So how can governance and institutional weaknesses in Nigeria be addressed to support more effective poverty reduction efforts? Because I think that's something we don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
Yes, and it is easy for the man at the top to to be disconnected with what is going on the streets. So he himself, there's something you call working on the shop floor by the CEO. Otherwise, the CEO may not exactly know what is going on the shop floor if he doesn't occasionally take a walk and speak to ordinary people and get to have a feel of what is going on. The more effective alternative, though, is to have structures for getting you the right information. Not just your direct report that tell you only what they know you like to hear. Because that is a problem. And I've seen that happen even in the private sector, where the CEO is blocked away from the reality on the shop floor by his own direct reports. You tell him what he wants to hear until you speak to someone across there. That's when you get to know, oh, this is actually what is happening. You know, I can give personal examples. I know.
That's what they call that's what they call being on ground.
Correct.
But what specific high potential sectors, other than oil, offer a quicker path to creating millions of living wage jobs and policy incentives? What policy incentives are required to maybe explore them?
Okay. Our SMEs, for example, are not doing well enough. Most of them, despite all the wins and recoveries that I was speaking about, some of them, it has not touched them as it's supposed to be. One of the ideas that is being bantered by in certain circles is how we can make those big players, those big corporates, how we can incentivize them to create venture capital funds or to put money in venture capital. Now, venture capital is a private sector-led thing. They will be able to support these SMEs, both technically, provide them the support, this is keeping your books, the understanding of your industry, and at the same time provide funds for them. As it is today, the startup fund that India alone receives in a year is more than what the entire Africa receives. Who is going to bring this money? Is it the foreigners? Or we need to look inward to see how we can incentivize people from within this country to also be able to set something sustainable aside and help the SMEs. Of course, one of the other problems we've had is in agriculture, where everything ends with primary products. So we sell cashew nut, we sell cocoa, we sell cola nut. And this talk about adding value has been there on the ground. Of course, I know there are a lot of factors that are against it, but we need to lay more emphasis on it. Manufacturing has a way of creating jobs. So if we step it up from exporting our commodities and we're able to do more in terms of adding value, that's another layer of employment that we're talking about. And it will not only help gear up the GDP of the economy, it will also help individuals to get jobs, and by so doing you have the multiplier effect of their income, and everything will just blossom, as it were.
Well, development expert Gbolahan Olojede, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thanks for having me.